What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jay Stevens, and on today's show, we're doing it a little bit different. On a Tuesday, we're bringing in a heavy hitter, somebody else to help us recap what we just watched on Sunday and what we've watched over the past three games. We are joined by Steven Means of Cleveland.com. Steven, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Jay.
Yes, sir. No problem at all. Steven, if you could, very quickly, let people know where they can catch you on social media and also where they can read some of your work as well.
Yeah, you can follow me at Steven_Means, literally my first name, STEPHEN_Means, MEANS, keep it short and simple. But then you can read our stuff at cleveland.com/OSU or cleveland.com/Buckeye Talk. That's where the majority, if you want to just get the analysis and the actual fun stuff, go to Buckeye Talk. If you want some of the boring news stuff, that's 150 words, go to cleveland.com/OSU. But either one of those works. But yeah, follow me at Steven_Means for more.
And in speaking of Cleveland.com, I read your article after the game, and I read your article that you put up today. But after the game, you described Sunday's loss to Iowa with one four-letter word: UGLY. A perfect way, a short way to recap what Buckeye fans witnessed on Sunday. Why, in your own words, did you use that word to describe how the Buckeyes played?
Yeah, because it was pretty much the polar opposite of what this team has been all season, especially when you think of the last time they played Iowa. That was beautiful basketball. Both teams scoring at a high level, some defensive stops here or there. I think that's the best Ohio State had played all year. And you can include the Michigan game as well, even though they lost that game. But in that second time against Iowa, they couldn't get a shot to fall. There was a lot of bad shots, a lot of bad passes, some ugly turnovers. There were some possessions where guys were trying to back down while somebody else was trying to seal in the post. It was ugly. I think I tweeted it out at one point before I decided what word I was going to use. It was the last time Ohio State and Iowa played, it was beautiful basketball, ... This time around, that's not the word I would use to describe, and I don't know what the word is yet. And everything you thought that was great about this Ohio State basketball team didn't happen on Sunday afternoon, and they got to fix that because, listen, they've got one game and a week left to figure it out before these games start. If they lose, they're going home.
Yeah, 1 week, and I think it is nice that they have extra time in between Iowa and Illinois to try to fix some of the kinks. It's unfortunate that players like Musa Jallow, Kyle Young, Seth Towns can't practice consistently because right now this is where you need everybody, all hands on deck, everybody coming in together to practice because there were issues on Sunday that were there, but some of the issues, they've been there before, just not exposed in the way. And I got to give credit, I'm sure you may have as well, give credit to Iowa's defense because Iowa saw how Ohio State was playing basketball. They said, we can meet them. And I liked what Fran McCaffrey was doing. The guards are beating Ohio State above the three-point line. So they weren't letting you get into your offensive flow a whole lot easier as you would like. Fran McCaffrey did a phenomenal job, and those guys missing practice time will be huge right now, not just for going into the Illinois game, but also going into the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things Iowa was doing on Sunday, and Iowa's not a great defensive team either, but it was a result of seeing a team a second time in this conference where, it seems like every other team's ranked in the top 10 every week, right? This is a result of that. Iowa kind of learned some lessons from some mistakes they made in the first game. I don't know if Ohio State necessarily did that, but also, yeah, there is something. Kyle Young's never going to be 100% healthy as long as he's here. That's never been the case. He's missed games every year of his career with some health issues. He's never been a guy who practices every single time, but that's one guy. When you start adding in the Musa Jallows of the world, the Seth Towns of the world, and whoever else you want to throw into there, it's kind of hard to get chemistry. Offensively, we know what this team is, right? It's Dwayne Washington Jr. and it's EJ Liddell. It starts with those two, and then Justice Sueing gives you some things sometimes, and then there's other times where he gives you absolutely nothing. But it starts with those three on the offensive end, and then CJ Walker as your true point guard, who's basically the floor general out there. But when you're dealing with a team who already isn't an elite defensive team, you need as much chemistry as possible on that side of the ball. And you can't do that when guys aren't practicing because they're playing 3 games pretty much every 7 days. And so this extra day of rest or practice, whatever way they decide to use it, it's going to be helpful because at this point, like I mentioned, At this point, you're playing every other week, every weekend if you want to win a national championship, you want to win a Big Ten championship. So to have this extra day where you don't have to go on the road and play at 9 o'clock at night, which doesn't make any sense because most of the Big Ten is in the Eastern time zone.
Right.
But whatever. That's helpful. Even if it means Kyle Young just sits at home on a game ready all night. That's better than him having to prepare to play another basketball game.
The 3-game losing streak to the team up north, to Michigan State, which that still confuses me that Ohio State lost to them, and then to Iowa. Bad play. The Wolverines are the better team. I'm not going to sit up here and say that they're not they're not the better team. Number 2 team in the latest AP poll. And you talk to some people around college basketball, they think that the Wolverines are going to win the national championship this year between them and Gonzaga. People kind of say Baylor, no, but I still think Baylor has a shot to win it. But a lot of people are high on Juwan Howard's boys over there in Ann Arbor. But I don't know if I know I didn't. I don't know if any listener did either, kind of saw a losing streak happening at this point in the season.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One, just fatigue. It's been a long year. Because if you look at when they were 10-1 in that stretch, if you look at the teams they were beating, those weren't lackluster, lower bottom feeder Big Ten teams. They were beating ranked opponents. That's a lot of really high level They've been playing tournament basketball for a month and a half now. I don't know how many teams in the country can say that they've been playing tournament level basketball since the beginning of January. So it's that. It's also, listen, at some point in the season, Ohio State was going to have a bad stretch. You were just hoping it wouldn't come now. But then when you look at the opponents they're playing, once again, they played Michigan, who I voted them number 1 in my AP poll. That's the best team in the country.
Yeah.
Michigan State, this isn't Tom Izzo's most talented team that he's had in the past 2 decades, but it's still Tom Izzo, and that team is starting to trend in the right direction. So you just caught Michigan State at a bad time. Just like the first game, they caught him at the right time. Michigan State was a game back onto the floor after dealing with COVID protocol. So obviously Ohio State was going to wipe them off the floor. Then you play Iowa, a top 10 team. Now they're going to play Illinois, a top 5 team. This is just – I don't know. This is not the ideal way you want a team who's trying to solidify themselves as a Big Ten regular season champion to try to close out their season and think that they were going to get any better than 1-2 in that situation or 2-2 in that situation. And so it's that. But then also just you playing some of these teams twice and say they understand some things. That first game could have gone either way. We all saw that game. The Michigan game, you got to be proud of that. You lost 92-87. I don't know how many Big Ten teams, I don't know how many college basketball teams can score 90 points consistently. So if that's what it takes to beat you, you're proud of that. The Michigan State game, that just is what it is. You chalked it up to the Big Ten, or as the Ohio State players like to call it, the 10. This Illinois game, we'll see what happens, but it's the same situation depending on whether the IO plays or not. And then Kofi Coburn's still down there in the post. These are just hard teams to beat. And so I think Ohio State's fine. They just need some rest, and they need to press a quick reset button. And I think they're fine, though. I think they're still a team that makes a deep run in both Big Ten and NCAA tournament.
What changes, if any, would you make between now and the beginning of the Big Ten tournament?
I think the first is you got to decide what you want out of Justin Arns, because he shot the heck out of the ball. Let's just be honest here. 46% is crazy. But if you really watch these games, they weren't running sets for him. He was just open because EJ and Dwayne drew so much attention that when you have an elite level shooter like that, he's going to knock down open shots at a high clip. All of a sudden, teams started paying attention to that. So you have to make a decision. Do you want him on the floor or not? Because you can't just have him on the floor and expect the same result that you got the first, 15 games of the season. You've got to run some stuff for him, but he's not that good of a player that you want to run sets for. So you have to decide what his minutes are. You have to decide what Musa Jallo's minutes are, because he's absolutely nothing for you offensively. He is a liability out there and someone you don't have to worry about. But at the same time, when you're playing the Ios of the world and the Joe Wiscomps of the world and such, you need somebody to be able to guard those players. So once again, with those two guys, which is more important that night? Shooting or defense? And that might be a game-to-game basis, but Holman's got to figure that one out. The most important key to all of this, though, is Justice Sueing. He's got to get tougher, man. That guy's 6'7", 215, and sometimes he plays like he's 6'7", 215 and can do a little bit of everything, but then sometimes he plays like he's 5'5", 140 pounds soaking wet, with how physical he cannot be at sometimes. So which Justice Sueing is going to show up for you? Because that's probably the deciding factor in a lot of these games. The first time they played Iowa, he had 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists. I mean, that's awesome. When they played Michigan, He was nowhere to be found. Now, he was better against Iowa, but if you look at those key moments down the stretch, you're wondering, Justice, what are you doing? That's not a smart decision with the back. So which Justice Suing is going to show up? Those are the three things I'm going to be looking at in this Illinois game, because that's what matters most. But then outside of that, I mean, is Seth Towns going to be more aggressive? Is his knee going to allow him to do that? What Kyle Young are you going to get? Is he going to be healthy enough to go for you on any given night? The only guy, two guys right now, you're going to get this from every single night are CJ Walker and EJ Liddell, because even Dwayne Washington, he can have 30. Yeah, that's great. But he can also have 30 shots and 5 points. Those are both on the table with them. So it's a lot of what we figured out with this team. It's high ceiling, but also an extremely low floor. And that's a dangerous game to play when you're entering into a territory where you got to win, 4 games to win a Big Ten championship and then 6 games to win an NCAA championship. That's just a lot. That's a wide range of things that can happen here.
I'm curious what you think about this thought, because I've said it here on the podcast, and it's something that's still in my head going back to Sunday's game against Iowa. Do you think that Justin Orange being in the starting lineup boosts his confidence and gives him the confidence to shoot more confident shots?
I think yes and no. I think he knows what his role is. His role has always been as a shooter. That hasn't changed. It's just the amount he gets to do it has changed. I think the taking Justin Orange out the starting lineup had less to do with what he was or wasn't doing and more to do with what Justin Suing and CJ Walker were and weren't doing. When Justice Suing was showing you that, at least for that first 6-minute stretch, 8-minute stretch till you get to that second timeout mark, that second media timeout, he can run your point guard so you can play a little bigger and keep Justin Orange on the floor, but also Justin's doing enough defensively to where he's not a liability. It was easier to do that. But when the Suing production went away and teams started taking away Justin Orange's most valuable asset, but also you're playing some teams who have 3 and 4 or 5 different weapons, you got to listen. CJ Walker's got to get back on the floor. So it's less. I don't know if his confidence is shot. He still looked confident when he was on the bench. He was still cheering, doing the necessary things you would expect from a third-year player. I think he's fine. We have to remember he shot 5 shots in the last 3 games. It's not like he shot 20 shots and he's 2 for 20. It's just he hasn't shot a lot, so it looks crazy when he hasn't made any. So I think he's fine. I just think it's going to be a matchup base with him. If they're playing Michigan, he probably shouldn't be on the floor that much if he's not knocking down a bunch of threes or at least getting them up. But when you're playing, maybe if they play Gonzaga in a Final Four, that's probably the game for him.
CJ Walker, he missed quite a few games. Well, he missed a few games, and he's been on the bench up until this most recent game. Do you think we see a scenario where he continues to start like he did against Iowa?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's back in the starting lineup at this point, but I don't think it necessarily matters. I think the bigger question, and somebody asked me this before he was put back in the starting lineup, is he going to play starter minutes? Whether you bring him off the bench or not, he's going to play 25 to 30 minutes every single night because he is – man, that's a valuable piece that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. It's just the calming nature he has out there. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes. He's the adult in a room, which you always need when you've got talent. Because when you've got talent, it can get loose. I mean, let's take the Golden State Warriors when they were in their heyday. All they could do, but also they turn the ball over a lot. So you bring Iggy in, who's the adult, a little bit more conservative. That's what CJ Walker is with this team. So it's whether he starts or not might depend on matchups, but what matters is the last 4 minutes of the game, he's going to be on the floor.
Interesting you mentioned the phrase calming effect, because there was a game recently, now the opponent escapes my memory, but the first 4 or 5, maybe even 6, probably 4 or 5 minutes, I don't think Holtman waited that long. The start of the game was bad. I mean, it was just sloppy. Nobody was on the same page. Nobody was communicating. Just on the offensive and defensive ends, it was just off, like really, really bad off. CJ comes into the game, and you notice offensively in transition, people are in their lanes. They're feeling. He's running the point guard in the break and also just in your regular offensive sets, and everything was calmed down. Everybody was a lot calmer. They were a lot smoother. And that's just, I think, not just the CJ Walker effect of him as a player, but also his veteran presence. And he's seen so much basketball at the collegiate level that if he can come off the bench in a mess, yeah, guys, they got to calm things down. Or if he starts and he senses a mess is brewing and there's a problem coming up very, very quickly, he can rally everybody and just calm them down and say, guys, look, trust me, I got this.
Yeah, I think that was the Penn State game where it kind of started sloppy.
Okay.
That was an ugly basketball game. I think what it So here's what most people don't understand about basketball. There's a big difference between somebody being a point guard and a playmaker. Those are not the same thing. Justice Sueing is a playmaker. CJ Walker is a point guard. The point guard is the guy who's telling you what to do. Yes, he can play make. He can do all that stuff the playmaker can do, but his most important job is being an extension of a coach and being the guy who is the smallest guy on the floor, but you better listen to everything he has to say to you. And so, yes, Justice Sueing running the point, quote unquote, for the first 4 minutes is fine because you just want talent out there. But at the end of the game, when you don't necessarily have a superstar, as good as EJ Liddell is, he's not there yet. Now, next year, talk to me next year when he's the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year favorite, okay? That's a different conversation. But for right now, as he's growing into this role of being the go-to guy on a really good basketball team, he probably needs somebody to tell him what to do. Dwayne Washington is wild. So he needs somebody to tell him what to do. And CJ Walker fills that role perfectly. And that's what Meechie Johnson has been brought here early to learn from. Because Meechie Johnson right now, if you've ever seen his highlight film, he's a playmaker. He's a really good basketball player, but he is not yet a point guard. And so this extra year that doesn't count against his eligibility of being able to learn how to be a point guard at this level is valuable. And I don't think there's a player better than CJ Walker in the Big Ten for him to learn that from.
Good, very good point. You mentioned the transition from like a playmaker and a point guard, those who start the game versus those who close the game. It makes you go back to the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Russell Westbrook. James Harden was a sixth man, came off the bench. Similar role to CJ Walker. All of a sudden, end of the game, last 5 minutes of the game, James Harden's there running the point, controlling everything, and allowing the guys to roll off of him, and he's calling the shots. And that's why that team was partly as lethal as they were. You had a coach that understood. I understand who's starting, but there's a guy on the bench that needs to close this game out. Big Ten tournament. You said that you see the Buckeyes possibly making a deep tournament run. What, maybe something you haven't mentioned yet, what will it take for the Buckeyes to do just that?
The offense to wake up again. They've had some bad halves, but I think they showed built enough equity throughout the season to let us know that what they were doing for the bulk of February and all of January, pretty much all season, that's sustainable. Guys, for the most part, take shots that they know they can make outside of Dwayne Washington. There's not a shot on the court that he doesn't think he can make, which I think is amazing. Really, it's just awesome watching Chris Holtman stare him down after he knows he's made a bad decision. That's one thing. No fans right now, you get to pay attention to stuff you would never see, and it's awesome. But for the most part, sustainable. CJ Walker doesn't take a lot of threes. He shoots mid-range shots and he hits them at a high clip. Justin Orange, that shot will come back. For the most part, all that sustainable. So the offense playing better, but also it's not an elite defensive team, but they can be better. They can get key stops and moments. They can't allow 92 points in a basketball game ever again, man. Even 80 is pushing it, especially when we get to the NCAA tournament. That's a different conversation because that's just about who can get hot for a month. That's a different situation. But in the Big Ten, you can't give up 80-plus points because teams are not good enough or not built in a way to get 80-plus points. So you got to find a way to – let's just take Sunday's game, for instance. Iowa had 73 points. That's a winnable game for Ohio State if its offense shows up, which is why, as bad as it looked, if you take the Ohio State from the first 20 games of the year and combine it with the way they defend it, even in the Michigan State game, they're fine. And so if the problem is offense, Ohio State will be just fine.
NCAA tournament, going to wrap it up with this. NCAA tournament is right around the corner. And I personally think you may, from just our short time talking, may agree with this as well. The Big Ten regular season, like you said, since January, the Buckeyes have basically been playing tournament basketball. And it's not many teams in the conferences that could say their group of teams as a whole has played tournament basketball since basically the beginning of league play. I think that benefits them. First weekend where you're playing a game, a day off, then another game, a few days off, then a game, a day off, then another game. If they make it to the Elite Eight, I think that benefits Ohio State. Even with all the issues that we talked about, even with all the problems that were somewhat exposed that they showed on Sunday, I think that grueling style of the Big Ten regular season benefits Ohio State going into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree just because they've played in a lot of games that matter.
Yeah.
I don't. Every conference doesn't have that because in the Big Ten, even the bottom feeders can beat you. I mean, Ohio State lost to Purdue twice this year. Right now, obviously, Purdue's turned into a pretty solid basketball team, but the point of the matter still stands. Purdue was at the bottom, was a bottom feeder for a good half of the season, and they still beat Ohio State twice. Michigan State literally just beat Ohio State last week, and so yep. When you look at the other top teams in the country, I understand Baylor was coming off some COVID issues, but the Big 12 is not. That's been Kansas's conference.
Yeah,
my entire life, and I'm 26, so it's been Kansas's conference literally for my entire life. And now Baylor's kind of come out of woodwork the last couple of years, but they haven't played anybody that talented. Gonzaga is, I mean, they're a Power 5 program in a G5 conference, so they really haven't played anybody. Mostly because the non-conference schedule that was supposed to give them people to play got messed up because. I hate COVID, but the point, the point I'm right there with you, man. I'm right there with you. It is what it is. I think when it comes to, I think Big Ten teams right now, especially the top of the leaderboard with Iowa, Michigan State, Illinois, and Ohio State, they might be a little bit more prepared coming into the tournament because they've been playing games that matter for a lot longer. So, yeah, it has a point. I do think outside of Michigan, those other teams still need matchup-based roads to get to the national championship game. But, yeah, the idea of every game seems like you might get blown out if you don't bring your best. That's something that these Big Ten teams have had to deal with.
Steven, this has been fun, man. Any last comments about this basketball team, either from what we just witnessed, things to come, the game against Illinois, anything just to wrap this show up?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, Ohio State football reigns supreme over Ohio State basketball, so sometimes I like to think about it in a football aspect. This end of the season stretch reminds me of the 2019 football season where it was Penn State, Michigan, Big Ten championship playoff. That's what this is right now, except Ohio State football team won all those games while Ohio State basketball is maybe struggling a little bit. But because it's basketball, you're able to go, relax, they're fine in a way that you maybe can't do with football because Ohio State is constantly having to prove itself on the football landscape to get into the playoff. I think with basketball, one, it's just more games, but also just it's a longer road to a championship game. Even with this stretch, as bad as it may look at face value, breathe, calm down. I think it's going to get better. Now, I might be wrong, and then you guys can at me on Twitter and tell me how wrong I was. I have no problem with that. I probably won't respond to you, but it is what it is. I just think right now that I feel like it's a lot of what is going on. This team was so awesome a week ago. Calm down. They just played a lot of really good basketball teams.
Speaking of Twitter, where people can at you, if you could, once again, let those people know where they can catch you on Twitter and also read some of your work as well.
Yeah. Follow me on Twitter at Steven_means, plain and simple, at Steven _means. I almost forgot my own Twitter name there. Wow. But cleveland.com/OSU or cleveland.com/Buckeye Talk. You can find all of my wonderful work there along with my colleagues, Nathan Baird and Doug Lameries.
And guys, you guys can always follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. Come back tomorrow. We're going to have a fun time talking about mock drafts. My guy, Ryan Roberts from NFL Draft Bible just released a 3-round mock draft. And on Football Wednesday, we're talking mock drafts once again to see where the Buckeyes fall, where he puts the Buckeyes in his mock draft for his upcoming NFL draft season.